Welcome everybody. It is good to be here. It's good to see each of you again. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces, which is good as well. And like Dave said, I was a long-term member here for quite a few years. In fact, I remember leading the youth group, being a part of the worship team, as well as PCRC chair. Ruth, is that your domain? Tom's, okay. So I have a lot of memories here at the chapel, and it's good to be back again. And so I look forward to sharing with you a little bit about Bridge of Hope today, as well as some devotional thoughts that kind of lead up to it. For those who don't know me, I am Audrey Metzler, like Dave said, and I'm currently serving as the Bridge of Hope Lancaster Director. How many of you have heard of Bridge of Hope before? Okay, how many have not heard of Bridge of Hope before? Okay, so it's a few new people. I know your church has actually mentored years ago. It used to be called mentoring. It's now called neighboring, and we'll talk a little bit more where that comes from. But yeah, it's been really a good journey. I actually started working for Bridge of Hope many years ago. And it was in 1997 to 2008, I served as the director of Bridge of Hope Lancaster and Chester counties, and that was for 11 years. And then I felt God calling me to a position in central Pennsylvania at a church called Community Mennonite Fellowship, and some of you know Linford Good. He was actually the connection there. They were praying about a position, and Terry and him were praying, and they said that my name came to their mind as they were praying, so they got in touch with me, and I sensed God's call to go there as well, and that's in central Pennsylvania in Milton, and so I served there for the last 12 years of, it's 13 years now, but it was 12 years that I was there. And then in January of last year, I moved back to Lancaster County. This has been my home area, and so as I've gotten older, I wanted to move back to where family and friends were, and so I moved back at the end of January last year and started working again at Bridge of Hope Lancaster, January 29th, so it's almost 1 year. It was right before the pandemic hit, and of course, as we know, the year has been quite interesting. So there's been a lot of changes in Bridge of Hope, as well as in the program itself, but there's still a lot that has not changed. It really is about helping homeless single moms become financially self-sufficient, and the way we do that is through a three-way partnership, which we'll hear a little bit more about. And I'm excited to have Dixie with us today. She is an alumni. I think a lot of you know her, but she's going to be sharing a little bit more of her story later on. I do want to just say something about the current situation of homelessness. I think probably all of you are aware that the situation is getting more severe. This past year, there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs because of COVID, and they've lost their ability to pay the rent, and so we're seeing the increase in referrals. And so what I'd like to do today really is to give you information about Bridge of Hope, enough so that you can kind of process in your own mind and pray about, does God want me to get involved in this ministry again? Because the issue is that we can't do what we do at Bridge of Hope without the support of the local church. And the local church is that's the organization that we get the neighboring volunteer groups from. And they are the vital link for the families that we work with. I hear time and time again women say, I couldn't have done it without your rental assistance. I couldn't have done it without your help in terms of case management and that kind of thing. But what made the difference was my relationship that I formed with the neighboring volunteers. And those are the ones that come from the local churches. So I'm hoping today I give you enough information and that you think about it and pray about it. And if there's 6 to 10 people who are willing to form a group, then I will give the next steps in terms of training. So before I get into a lot of that, I would like to turn our attention to Scripture, and I'm going to be looking at the very common and well-known story of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. And if you want to If you want to follow along with me as I read, I'm going to be reading from Luke 10, verses 25 to 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied, "and how do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus said. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." I've entitled this little sermonette. I don't preach sermons. This is a little sermonette. I've entitled it, "How is your vision?" Because I believe this story is about our vision, what we see, and what we do with what we see. I grew up and I always had 20/20 vision. I came from a family where my mother and my father and my brother and my sister all had to wear glasses. And I took a sense of pride in the fact that I had 20/20 vision and I didn't have to wear glasses. That all changed when I turned 40. And I'm sure those of you who wear glasses can attest to that. 20/20 vision is not always a given as you age. 20/20 always meant a good thing, but since last year, it's not always a good thing anymore. But anyway, 20/20 still means perfect vision. And yet, the past year, I was diagnosed with a health condition. Do you want to hear the term? Idiopathic intracranial hypertension pseudotumor. And I won't bore you with the details. If you want more information, I'll give it to you later. You can ask me. But it affects my optic nerve. And so in the very first time in my life, I realized how precious eyesight was and the fact that I could lose my eyesight and that it's a gift that we should never, never take for granted. In this story of the Good Samaritan, vision is the key. It's about what people see, and it's about what they do with what they see. So let's look at the characters a little bit more in depth. First of all, you've got the expert in the law. This is a Jewish leader. He comes to Jesus and he asks a question. But what are his motives? Why is he doing this? It says he came to test Jesus. And a little bit later it says that he wanted to justify himself. So I would assume that throughout Scripture there's examples of people trying to test Jesus, trying to catch him in things and make a fool of him in public. But this guy came to Jesus, asked a question, but his motives were impure. He wanted to test Jesus and he wanted to justify himself. He probably wanted to show Jesus up in a very public way and make himself look good. Secondly, there's the man that's going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And this is the victim in this story. There's not a lot of details about this guy. In fact, this is the only one that we don't know if he was Jew or Gentile. We don't know what he did. We don't know what profession he had. It just basically said that he was robbed on his way from one city to another. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. We don't even know why, what the motive was, or if he did anything to put himself into harm's way, if there was anything he did to deserve being robbed, or if he was responsible for what happened in any way, shape, or form. We don't know any of that. All we know is that he was robbed. And I was in the Middle East. I was actually along that road from Jerusalem to Jericho. And it's a well-traveled by business people. And so it's a good place to rob people. So anyway, it says he was beaten, he was stripped of everything, and he was left for half dead, lying along a road in need for help and mercy. So that's the victim. So we've got the Jewish leader that comes and asks Jesus the question. We've got the man who is the victim. He's lying on along the road in need of help. He's half dead. And then we've got three other characters coming along. First of all, it's a priest. He's the Jewish leader. One that you would assume that he would probably do something about this situation. He comes along. He sees what is going on, but he does nothing. In fact, he avoids the situation, and he goes across the other side of the road and passes by. In fact, he goes out of his way to ignore the need. Now, hang on to that a little bit. We'll come back to that. Next, there's a Levite. He's also a Jewish leader. He comes along. You think, okay, that he's going to help. He sees the man, says that he saw the man, but he did nothing. He crossed over on the other side. He also avoids looking and chooses to ignore the need as well. I was reminded recently of how often we do this. Maybe you're different than me, but how often we avert our eyes or ignore or turn aside from something that we're not sure what to do with, or something that makes us uncomfortable. I lived in Philadelphia, like Dave said, and homeless were all around us. We were very used to seeing that, and I got almost callous to it. Now in Lancaster City and Lancaster County, I'm seeing more homeless. I don't know about you up in this neck of the woods, but down where I'm circulate a lot, I'm starting to see more homeless, carrying signs, carrying buckets for money, we'll work for food and that kind of thing. And I'm reminded of this story because I've watched as people look at somebody like that and quickly turn aside. In fact, I've done it myself. I don't know, is it a scam? I want to know what has happened. I want to know why I should get involved before I get involved. And so it's a human characteristic to avoid what we see and not do anything. Last but not least, the last character is the Samaritan. He's a Gentile. The Samaritans were hated and despised by the Jews, and they had nothing to do with them. He's the one you don't expect is going to do anything, because here's an enemy. Why would I help this person out? He doesn't ask for an explanation. Why did it happen? He doesn't need to know any of the details. He just sees the need and responds. He doesn't calculate the cost before he responds. He simply sees the need and chooses to respond in compassion. So there's a couple things in this story that strike me in terms of our vision. The importance of seeing. Seeing is the first step, I believe, in helping someone. We can see a need and choose not to help, but we can't truly help unless we see the person in need. And I'm not talking about just visually seeing, but really looking beyond the need and seeing the person. I work with homeless women, and a lot of times they will say, I just feel like I'm invisible. People don't want to associate with me. They don't want to help. I feel invisible. I feel like a no one. And so that just confirms the fact that a lot of times you can't help without truly seeing the person in need. Seeing the need and responding to that need does not demand information on why it happened, what caused the trauma, what caused the homelessness. If we demand information, then we set ourselves up to be judge instead of a good neighbor. If we feel the person at all deserve the consequences of their decisions, then we're less likely to have compassion and help the person in need. Does this tug on anybody's heart? It does on mine. Even though I'm involved in helping a population that's very vulnerable, I also see the hesitancy in my own personal life. You know, where's the wisdom in terms of helping somebody? Yes, I think we need to have wisdom, but how often does God put something in our path, we see it, but we choose not to do anything with what we see? The last thing is the importance of actually doing something. A good neighbor not only sees what's going on, but they step out and do. It's a call to action. In fact, getting involved or being a good neighbor is often costly. It will cost you some time, some energy, some effort, maybe some money, resources, maybe even your reputation. Is this something that you're willing to put forth? Neighboring also does not expect anything in return. This is a challenge as well. There's a lot of times neighboring volunteers get involved and they're like, oh boy, I was expecting to get something out of this as well. A lot of times they say at the end of it, I feel like I've gotten more out of this experience than what I've given. And so it's a rewarding thing as well. But sometimes it's important to recognize that it's just our obligation. It's what we do without expecting anything in return. The Good Samaritan paid for his care without expecting anything in return. He opened his heart and his wallet because there was simply a need to do so. How often do we help somebody without expectations of a certain outcome? So this story of the Good Samaritan has a lot of parallels to our work at Bridge of Hope. There is always a person in need, a person that's been victimized by life in some way, shape, or form. Abusive relationships, trauma, sexual abuse, a nasty divorce, abandonment, loss of job, loss of health. In fact, we're seeing the amount of trauma increase. When I was at Bridge of Hope 13 years ago, trauma was always a part of who came to Bridge of Hope. But now, when I'm interviewing women, I'm just seeing so much more traumatic experiences, what they've gone through. I don't know what that says other than I think people are much more vulnerable to traumatic experiences in this culture in which we live today. So this victimization really is difficult for women to create a better future, believe that they can create a better future for themselves and their children. And what they really need is somebody to walk alongside of them, not only see their need, but respond in compassion, love, and support. And then as time goes on, you know, after the experience and while the experience is going on, we find that a lot of times neighboring volunteers say, I feel like I've been blessed more than what I have been able to give to this situation. I feel like I've gotten more out of the situation. And it's been a blessing. So hopefully these things have been an encouragement to you and also maybe a challenge. I'm not asking everyone in this room to become a part of a neighboring volunteer group, but maybe some of you feel called to be a part of that group. Others may feel called to pray more. Others may feel called to give financially. So just be open to what God is sharing with you and what He may be asking you to do. And with that, I'd like to invite Dixie to come up and share a little bit of her story and her journey through life and her experience with Bridge of Hope. So Dixie?